Madison. I'm a rising senior at Nassau High School.
My name is Trian Song. I'm a recent graduate of Half Hollow Hills High School East. I'm headed to Emory University in the fall.
My name is Dahlia, and I'll be a rising senior at Nassau High School.
And we are the March for Our Lives Long Island chapter.
So we're here today to have our first rally as we are the board of, and we're really thankful for everyone who came today. We're excited to have the rally.
Let's go. Get everybody in here.
Being high school students in this day and age, we have spent countless hours in lockdown drills, lockout drills, and gun awareness trainings. Every week there is a new shooting in the news, more fatalities, and more injuries. As of 5 days ago, America has experienced over 260 mass shootings this year alone. Last year, there were 647 mass shootings. Death is not a political issue. These are people's children, mothers, fathers, students, teachers, and friends. As teenagers, stopping the gun violence epidemic is a pretty daunting task, but nothing can be changed with inaction and silence. So Trian, Dahlia, and I decided to revive the Long Island chapter of March for Our Lives with the goal of spreading awareness about gun violence, gaining support for important legislation like the assault weapon ban, providing a forum for young people on Long Island to get involved, and carrying out the national chapter's mission. March for Our Lives' mission, as stated on their website, is that March for Our Lives is a courageous, youth-led movement dedicated to promoting civic engagement, education, and direct action by youth to eliminate this epidemic of gun violence. We run this chapter of the intention of carrying out this mission with every post, every meeting, and every event. We are so proud to be a part of such an amazing movement, and we're so incredibly happy to see that all of you are now part of the movement as well. We are the future, and we are the change.
Throughout this academic year, the Long Island chapter of March for Our Lives has accomplished a multitude of successes. Our first course of action consisted of a seminar-based workshop in which our chapter sought to teach members in our community how to effectively communicate with local politicians. In this particular meeting, March for Our Lives Long Island sent over 50 emails to New York State Senators Kirsten Gillibrand and Charles Schumer, urging them to vote in favor of the assault weapons ban. Additionally, our chapter organized an informational meeting focused on teaching members about the types and extremities of various states' background checks. We discussed specific pieces of legislation ranging from drug screen laws to NICS background checks, and explained how the absence of thorough mandatory background checks in many states leads to a higher possibility that these weapons of war end up in the wrong hands. Outside of the chapter meetings, March for Our Lives Long Island has shared a multitude of informational posts regarding important pieces of proposed legislation, such as the red flag law. We shared a specific instance in which a red flag law prevented a school shooting in Florida, delineated which states have red flag laws, and track the development of these laws in Congress, with Congress passing a bipartisan law to provide $750 million for state crisis intervention just this past year, and President Biden announcing an executive order to increase the commonality of these red flag laws and to increase the number of background checks conducted before firearm sales. The impact of our chapter reverberates throughout our community, igniting the spark that set fire to a sea of change-hungry youth that are now finally equipped with the resources to take action. Though our work has just begun, we have witnessed how a strong sense of community, bolstered through unity and strength, can instill change starting on the smallest of levels, and how, with the right tools and desire for progress, the world can change for the better, one student at a time. I would like to take a moment to thank our board from this current academic year, consisting of Jacob Muscolino, Theo Gaeta, Lily Kohler, Sumi Shah, and Tom Jamison. All that we have accomplished this year would not have been possible without your efforts. Thank you.
While we celebrate our accomplishments in the last year, we want to take a moment to look to the future of March for Our Lives Long Island. Unfortunately, this fight is not over, and this fight will not be over till we can take the bulletproof doors out of our schools. We have more work to do. In the 2023 to 2024 year for March for Our Lives, we plan on having more large community events like this. We will have more rallies, hear more voices, and demand more action. We are looking to plan town halls to connect community members with the politicians that can change the existing policies. We want to highlight more survivor voices and show that there are real voices and faces to these statistics. In Suffolk County, they passed a bill making June 2nd Gun Awareness Day. We will work to see similar legislation coming from this very building and other counties on Long Island. This legislation is important to raise awareness about the issue and have our government officials acknowledge the lives lost from gun violence. March for Our Lives Long Island will be doing endorsements of candidates that will do the work we cannot do, actually sign anti-gun legislation into law. We will support these candidates with our cohort of youth advocates, as well as amplify their voices in our events. We have to acknowledge the disparities in gun protection measures in wealthy versus less wealthy schools. We want to help the communities that cannot afford to protect their children by looking towards legislation and demanding fund appropriations. These are just some of our plans, but we want to hear from our communities about what we can do and how we can all work together against the violence that plagues this country and our home. We encourage every young person here to get involved with our organization. Go above and beyond for the issue that you care about by devoting your time and energy to our fight. Thank you. We want to thank Josh Lafazan for consistently supporting us and co-sponsoring this event. And we also want to thank our partnering organizations, Moms Demand Action, AYLUS, and League of Women Voters for coming here today. And we urge you all to go to their tables, stop at their tables, and see what they have to say as well. On a personal note, me and Dahlia would like to take the time to thank Trian as she leaves her role as co-executive director and is on her way to Emory. This would not have been possible without her reaching out to us last summer to begin this chapter. And we would like to thank and congratulate all of our executive board graduates, so Lily Kohler and Tom Jameson. Thank you all for coming, because without all of your support, we wouldn't be able to accomplish any of this today. So we hope you enjoy the program that we have for you today, and thank you. We have had the pleasure of working with Legislator Lafazan as a co-sponsor for our rally today. He has been such a help to us as young organizers, and we admire his willingness to work with kids when so many politicians won't. Legislator Lafazan is a legislator for District 18. He has sponsored crucial legislation for safe gun storage. He'll be running for Congress against George Santos. Please give a warm welcome to Legislator Lafazan.
Very much. Thank you. Let's hear it for these organizers. What you've done to bring this community together is making a difference in people's lives, and I couldn't be more hopeful when I look at all of you. Another round of applause. These are amazing. My name is Josh Lafazan. I serve in this building as Nassau County Legislator, and I'm here to say what's happening in America is not normal. It is not normal that 1 million people have been shot in the last decade. It is not normal that guns are the leading cause of death for children under 18. It is not normal that on average someone is killed with a gun every 12 minutes in this country. It's not normal that between lessons for math and science, kids are learning the protocols of active shooter drills. And it's not normal that whether it's a mall or a movie theater, a concert venue, a park, a graduation, that there seems to be no place in America that you are fully safe from the epidemic of gun violence. Things have to change. And it's this generation that's going to change things. And we're counting on you to change things. Because as the only industrialized nation on earth suffering this gun violence epidemic, it's not rocket science what we have to do. And right here in Nassau, we have to pass my red flag law to keep guns out of the hands of those who suffer mental illness. And we need to do that today. We need to pass, in this country, universal background checks and finally enact them nationwide. We have to pass safe storage here in Nassau County to keep guns safe in houses that have infants. We're still struggling to get that law passed. We know we have to do more. We have to raise the age to 21 to buy a firearm, and we have to ban assault weapons. We have to ban those weapons of war and keep them off our streets once and for all. Ladies and gentlemen, we can do all of this. There are states in this country that have done this. The question is not, can we do it? The question is, will we? And I look at every young person here, And I know that you will not stop fighting until we get this done. So let us hear them. Let us in Washington, let them hear us. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. And you guys are going to make it so. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Josh Lafazan. So now we will be hearing from Healing with Music. They are a student-led nonprofit organization out of Syosset High School and other high schools around the island who aim to spread happiness and healing through music. So today they'll be performing 3 selections, Rise Up by Andra Day, Yellow by Coldplay, and Halo by Beyonce. We hope you enjoy their performance.
Broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find the fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out and move mountains. We gon' walk it out and move mountains. And
I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. And I'll rise up, high like the waves, I'll rise up, in spite of the ache, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you, for you, for you, for you. I'll shut you out. Everywhere I'm looking now, I'm surrounded by your embrace. Baby, I can see your face. You know you're my saving grace. You're everything I need and more. It's written all over your face. Baby, I can feel your halo, and it won't fade away.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Gaafar. I'm from Rockville Center. Also survivor of the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history, which took place in Las Vegas on October 1st, 2017. I'd spent most of that month traveling for work to various music festivals. This was finally our last event. As you can imagine, my wife was looking forward to me coming home to help with our kids. I wasn't looking forward to changing diapers, but I couldn't wait to see them. As we were getting ready to leave, we had heard a couple of pops that sounded like fireworks. The performance continued, so I didn't think much of it at the time. My hope for fireworks soon faded. I realized the sounds were gunfire and quickly found shelter. As I started to hear the ping noises, bullets hitting metal around me, I'll never forget a strange pressure on my body. It was a shockwave of bullets passing right over me. I'll never forget the eerie silence of 20,000 people during the shooting, the horrific screams of grown women and men in between each reload, the look of fear on police officers' faces as I ran out the exit. And I will never forget the sound of that weapon. It's worse than you can ever imagine, especially when it's being fired at you. The sheer firepower unleashed by bump stock AR-15s should only be seen in a war zone, and never in American city. Over 1,000 bullets were fired, murdering 58 innocent souls and wounding more than 500 people. This happened in 10 minutes by one person. In the aftermath of the shooting, I struggled to make sense of what had happened. Loud noises and pops still startle me, but every day does get better. When you experience gun violence, it makes you see the world differently. I don't want to live in a country where mass shootings are as American as apple pie, where guns are worshipped as idols and the protection of life is secondary. It's like we're becoming one nation under gun. And this shouldn't be a partisan issue. This is an American issue about public safety. But I'm angered by the lack of leadership and courage to prevent gun violence. It steals over 110 lives every day in our communities. That's almost 2 Las Vegas massacres every single day. The solutions may be obvious, but it doesn't mean it will be easy. The speed of change can be frustrating at times, and the opposition will be ruthless, immoral, and unrelenting. But I think back to my 3 days at the event, and I'm reminded of what makes this country great. I met hundreds of people at the concert who had completely different political views than me. I came away believing that we're not as divided as some politicians and cable news shows want you to believe. These were honest and good people that just wanted to have fun at a concert and pursue happiness. They're no different than your coworkers, neighbors, family, and friends. We must do more to protect ourselves and our communities together, but we owe it to the victims, their families, and ourselves to take action. Because I don't think anyone likes death, so let's make it harder to die and easier to live. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jacob Muscolino. I'm a junior at Happel Hills High School East in Dix Hills and a lifelong resident of New York. Living in this beautiful state my whole life has given me a deep appreciation for all it has to offer. From the beach, to the city, to the good bagels, to the stunning nature up north. There's so much more that New York has to offer, and there's so much to love about our home. However, this place that I and so many of us call home is under threat from a blight viciously taking lives and making New York a dangerous place as a result. A report by the United Hospital Fund in 2021 found 1,000 of the 48,000 deaths due to gun violence took place here in New York. These large numbers have only tended to increase in the past 2 years. Almost a year ago in Buffalo, 10 New Yorkers lost their lives just at their local supermarket. In America, gun violence is now the leading cause of death among youth. According to the CDC, 1 in 5 deaths in children and teenagers can be attributed to the trigger of a gun. Even scarier, the CDC also finds that 327 people on average a day are shot, and 117 of those victims die. At this point, you're probably wondering why, with all this evidence, why has there not been a major change in policy at the federal level? 3 words sum this up: thoughts and prayers. So many of the officials we trust when we elect them to office put out this message in the wake of gun violence-related events. However, thoughts and prayers are simply not the viable solution to put an end to this plague. Instead, what we need is action. Change is fully possible when action is taken. A study by Harvard found that strengthening background checks results in a 15% decrease in the rate of gun violence for a state. Also, the most common weapon utilized in mass shootings is the AR-15, which is a military-grade weapon. Banning these would have insurmountable impacts on the rates of gun violence. But overall, my hope is that the state that I love will no longer be forced to bear the consequences of so-called thoughts and prayers, but rather be uplifted by the pursuit of action. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope the words my fellow peers and I have shared have changed how you view gun violence. Thank you.
We will be hearing from Jimmy Dougherty, a longtime activist and founding member of Moms Demand Action, Long Island.
January 23rd, 2018.
Talking to the mic, please.
On January, much better. On January 23rd, 2018, emerging chapter in Nassau, Moms Demand Action, held their first membership meeting. Because of that meeting, we now had 40 members. I had an index card on each one of them. I knew where they lived. I talked to them about what kind of opportunities they wanted to get involved with moms, and things were great. By the morning of February 14th, I had called them all, and by that night, we had 340 members. On Valentine's Day, 2018, the parking shooting happened. I thought that the change that occurred with my local chapter, so many people would occur out in the gun violence world, but that didn't happen. One of the survivors of that day was a student, an MFOL, original member, Emma Gonzalez, now ex-Gonzalez. You might remember her because she started that chant we call BS. Her life was then spiraling in a different direction, forever confined her to a darkened path by the events of that Valentine's Day. I'd like to share some of her thoughts over the last 5 years. I will not tell you my triggers or the things I can no longer enjoy because they are fluid and changing. Sometimes I look up at the sky with no clouds and all I can think of is how that was what the sky looked like on the day of the shooting. Sometimes I just think, oh, I wish there were clouds because it's so hot. If all our government and president can do is send thoughts and prayers, then it's time for victims to be the change that we need to see. We're going to be the kids you read about in textbooks, not because we're going to be another statistic about mass shooting in America, but because we are going to be the last mass shooting. It didn't happen. It's been almost 5 years since my classmates and I marched for the first time, and it's hard not to feel like things are pretty much the same. Gun violence happens every day in this country. I see my March for Our Lives compatriots at protests once or twice throughout the year. I'm still trying to figure out what type of activism I want to engage in, since I don't want to be passive for the rest of my life, but I cannot exist in the way that I used to. Thanks to the media attention, I had a level of fame that many activists worked for years to try to attain. And I thought I knew what I was supposed to do. We had to take our pain and spin it into political action, solving a problem that had been centuries in the making, a century in the making. It became clear that part of the reason we were getting so much media attention was because we were a bunch of mostly white kids from the suburbs. While the reality is that gun violence in the U.S. disproportionately affects black and brown people. Once we realized how limiting we had been in our scope, we began to focus on all forms of gun violence. In retrospect, of course, we weren't doing enough, but it was a better start than our peer organizations could claim. I formally stepped away from March for Our Lives in my second year of college after spending my first year trying to do both school and professional activism. I switched my focus from politics to problems in our society, learning a little bit about everything after spending my late teens laser focused on just one topic. I started sharing more politically radical ideas on my official social media accounts, things that I had always felt but never felt like it was the right time or space to say. I had been thinking more about gun violence perpetuated by police, and my post about that got a lot of pushback. The same white liberals who were against gun violence in schools thought criticizing police brutality went too far. On June 11th, 2022, that was last year right here, the day before the anniversary of the shooting in the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, March for Our Lives put together marches. It marked the 4th year that the organization had been participating in the fight against gun violence. With all the people who spoke at the marches, the message was unanimous and clear. We must pass gun laws. We must pass laws against gun violence, or eventually everyone will share those experiences. I directed my speech at members of Congress. I spoke to the fact that in my time as an activist trying to protect this country from itself, the only thing standing in the way of a life without headlines about mass shootings or the news that a lover was taken by a gun had been Congress. Those who are currently in office are the only people who can make this change. And it is the sole purpose of their job to pass the laws that the people want. I let myself self-restrain encourage the Congress in this speech for the simple reason that it is unfathomable to me that there would be people in this world who ran for office with the intention of making the world a better place, are presented with the facts about gun violence, and choose to ignore them in favor of making money from gun manufacturers. We are dying. The people whose job it is to stop us on Capitol Hill sit around all day doing nothing, letting us sit like fish in a barrel with the AR aimed directly at us in every direction. In the meantime, we are on hold with our representatives. I can tell you a few other things to do. Let's start small. Don't get a gun. Don't let anybody you love get a gun. Focus on getting gun ownership levels down in your community. Become an annoyance to your local elected officials. Make them see that it's up to them as the mouthpieces for the people they represent to speak with your words. Organize a protest in your area or a community gathering with people with the intention of raising awareness and money for local or national fights. If you haven't, donate $10 to March for Our Lives or to your local gun violence prevention organization. Go to your local open mic nights and rile people up. There's a memorial garden in your community. Visit and spend some quiet time and thought. Treat this like it could happen to you, because it can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jimmy, for sharing your words. Now we will hear from Dr. Meltzer Krief, who has been a pediatrician in Huntington for almost 25 years. She's a legislative advocacy chair of the Long Island, Queens, Brooklyn chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. She's a passionate child advocate on issues affecting health, but also on the well-being of children and families, including the desperate need for gun safety legislation in this country. She's running for Suffolk County Legislature in the 18th District. Let's all give a warm welcome to Dr. Eve.
Good afternoon, everybody. So, I'm a pediatrician, and so much of what we do in pediatrics is prevention, right? We try and prevent children from getting sick and from getting injured. So we tell parents of newborns to make sure that they put their babies to sleep on their backs when they get home to prevent sudden infant death syndrome. And we make sure that they're in car seats that are rear-facing until they're 2 years old to prevent deaths in motor vehicle accidents. And our young children that are learning to ride their bikes, we make sure that they wear helmets. And we give vaccinations to prevent the rare but very serious consequences of some of the diseases that the vaccines prevent. Because as pediatricians, we understand that children aren't supposed to die. Right? And the death of any child is tragic, But when that death is preventable, there's nothing more tragic than a death that was preventable in a child. So that's why when the statistic came out last year that gun violence was the #1 cause of death in our children, it was like a slap in the face as pediatricians, right? To everything we do every day to try and keep our children healthy and safe. And just a staggering statistic to think about that more than anything else, guns are killing more of our children than anything else. And not only is it a horrifying statistic, but it's frankly embarrassing, right? There is no other country in the Western world that has this level of gun violence where so many of our children are dying from guns and we do nothing about it. Nothing. And it really is a public health emergency. That's why I always wear this shirt everywhere I go, because we have to treat this like the public health issue that it is, right? Just like we require seatbelts in cars and car seats for our babies, we need to enact common sense gun legislation that will keep our children safe, right? And it is a crisis when between 2019 and 2021, we had a 50% increase in the deaths of children under the age of 18. This is happening so fast and so frequently, and we continue to do nothing, and we have to act. In the last several years, we've also heard about another crisis, right? A mental health crisis, right? And I'm seeing it every single day in my patients and children your age, just increasing levels of anxiety and depression. Our children are really, really struggling, and this has many causes, right? It was an issue before the pandemic, and we know the pandemic heightened that with the isolation that was forced upon many children during the pandemic. But I think it's also our political landscape, right? And it's the rhetoric that's out there. And I think that the gun violence and mental health, both of these crises are kind of inextricably linked in many ways, right? Because you growing up, hearing about all these school shootings more and more frequently, that sits in your consciousness, right? You carry that with you. Children see and hear everything, right? And that enters their consciousness, and they carry that with them. And children who experience gun violence, where they're not necessarily the victims themselves, someone else is killed, but if they're a witness, or it's been found that children living within a 3-block radius of gun violence will be traumatized for months, if not years, after that. And we know that suicide is the second leading cause of death in our children, right, in our teens. And we know that if they choose to use a gun to commit suicide, more than likely they're going to be successful than choosing other means. And we know that we're making our little ones endure these lockdown drills from a very young age, and at some point as they're getting older, they're going to come to understand what it is that they're actually doing, and that's going to be in their consciousness, and they're going to be carrying that with them. But I think most profound of all is when our children come of age, like you, and you come to understand and realize that something can be done about this, right? That it doesn't have to be this way. And our legislators are failing us, right? Every day that we fail to enact common sense gun legislation in this country, we are failing our children. So that's why it gives me so much hope to see you all here today and to put this event together again and to keep on fighting this fight, despite everything that you guys have all endured over the last few years, right? The political landscape, the gun violence, the school shootings, the increase, almost on a weekly basis, the pandemic, the isolation, the mental health crisis that you're all enduring. And despite all those challenges, to be here today, standing up, speaking out, and demanding that our legislatures do more to put kids first. We have a saying at the American Academy of Pediatrics, put kids first. In this country, we should put kids first. We should do everything we can all the time to keep our children safe. And right now, we are not doing that. And as long as we don't do that, we are failing our children, and we must keep fighting. You inspire me, you give me hope to keep fighting, and I promise you, none of us here will end this fight until we get the safety and the legislation that you all deserve.
Thank you so much for that speech. So now, to conclude this event, we want to tell you guys what you can do to join the fight. So first thing would be to follow our Instagram. That's our main form of communication. So it's right there at mfol.li. And you can also follow the Instagrams of the New York State chapter and the national chapter. And then from there, you can find our Slack link, which is also where we communicate a lot with our members. So then once you become a member, you can attend our events and help us plan more rallies like this so we can spread our influence. And we also have board applications open right now. They'll be open until next week. So if you would like to apply to be on the board like we are, you can also do that. Thank you to all of our speakers, all of our partnering organizations, and all of you for coming, because we couldn't do it without you. So we urge you to head over to the tables before you leave, and thank you so much.